this morning. Good morning, everyone. It's Madeline with Together SC. We're thrilled to have you here with us this morning. We've got a good crowd, so you should all be on mute. But will you please share in the chat box your name, your title, your organization, or maybe not your title, your organization, and where you're zooming in from, so that we can help connect folks with one another. And then we'll ask you if you will put your questions there as well, and put a Q in front of the question, so we can find those. I have the Together SC team with me today because I have to bow out early. Desmond, our Zoom Czarina, is behind the Together SC logo, managing the call. And Brooke is on our communication support, and Destiny Hester. If you haven't met Destiny, she's our new membership person. They'll be with you today, helping to assist Shauna and Chamlee in this terrific call. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the CEO listserv. If you haven't joined that, please consider doing so, because that's where the idea for this session came about, or at least the need was identified. There was hey, what have you got that I can use to help develop my management abilities and those of my managers within my organization? And as you know, we've got the summit coming up in February, and we had such an amazing submittal in response to our request for proposals. We had over 100 submitted, and we only have room for about 50. So when I saw that Shauna and Chamlee had submitted 2, I said, let's do one in advance. So consider this your preview, as a chance to see and meet them, because they will also be doing a session at the summit. And I'll ask our team to put a link to that summit session in the chat box for you to find at a later date. But first, let me tell you about Chamlee and Shauna. And what I love about them, first off, is their partnership. And we were just doing a how you met, do you know story. And they came to meet one another through many of our Together SC colleagues. Forrest Alton, a former board member and board chair, and one of our consultant collab members, met Shauna through a number of different people. And then when Chamlee was starting her consulting practice, he connected them. Chamlee's calling in from Spartanburg, where she served for 12 years as the CEO for the Hope Center for Children. So she knows what you're dealing with. She went through a merger, adoption of evidence-based programming, development of 4 new programming, and a redeveloped governance structure, as well as other client serving and revenue generating issues that we all face as executive directors. Shauna is calling in from Charleston, I believe. Shauna, Charleston, Somerville? Where are you calling in from?
Mount Pleasant.
Mount
Just
Pleasant.
outside of Charleston.
Yeah. Where she has a consulting practice that focuses in change management and organizational effectiveness. She's been doing that for over a decade, working with not only nonprofits, but corporations and a whole slew of folks. So their bios are on the event page, and their profiles within the Together SC consultant directory. I hope you'll use that directory to meet them and so many of our other wonderful consulting partners that are indispensable to Together SC's work. As most of you probably realize, Together SC's team is about managing the knowledge sharing, not delivering it. So when we find great people offering good programming, we want to make sure and put them in front of you. And that's what we're doing today. So without further ado, Chamlee, I'll turn it over to you, and then Shauna. And thank you both for being with us today. We are so excited to hear about this new tool you have discovered and how our colleagues might be able to use it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Good morning, everyone. I think that Shauna is actually going to get us started this morning, but we are so glad you're all here.
Thank you so much, Chamlee, and thank you, Madeline, for that wonderful introduction. We are very excited to be here. And as consultants and as coaches, nothing brings us more joy than to share some tools and share some knowledge that can help you to further your mission and further your cause. So as you know, today's session is going to be is titled Build Your Team Skills with Grow. And we prepared this primarily because there are some key skills from the coaching world that are important for you to understand and know and having your toolkit as you go through working through your organizations. So in terms of introduction, Madeline just gave a really great introduction for us. Thank you for that. Um, as she mentioned, my practice is here based in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and my work is primarily focused on change management, strategic planning, operations planning, but also a lot of coaching and development. And one of the things that I have experienced working with folks who are in the C-suite level and folks who are really passionate and very strategic is sometimes there is it's a very interesting transition to come out of kind of the strategy world, if you will, and thinking long term, and actually bringing that more to the tangible, tactical that your team members live in day to day as they execute the mission. So I am excited to bring to you whatever skills that I have and support you in any way I can, and to help you with kind of coming up with these common sense approaches to making sure that you are actually achieving the challenges and achieving the solutions that you'd like. Chamlee?
Hi, everyone. I'm Chamlee McGuire. I see a few familiar faces and a lot of folks I don't know, and both of those are wonderful. As Madeline said in my introduction, I have been a executive director, a CEO. I have been in lots of different roles within the nonprofit sector for the last 25 years, and I know how many hats we all have to wear. And so I founded Heightened Development really to be that strategic thought partner, especially with organizations when they are growing and developing, need to pivot or change, to really look at how do you build out all the right systems and structures and people and processes to achieve those big strategic goals. But I'm all about a tool that is very tangible that we can use immediately. And that's what we are going to share with you today. So thanks for being here.
Great. So to get us started, I know we're only have about an hour together today, and we want to make sure to leave time for Q&A at the end. But just to go through what we're going to accomplish today. So again, to Chamlee's point, we are all about what are things that are tactical, that are tangible, that you can actually put into your toolkit and use right away. And so what we're going to accomplish today is going through what's called a GROW model, which that model originated in the coaching world, and really gets to the point of sometimes you need to shift and transition between your roles, whether it's a supervisor or a coach or CEO or COO. They're all different roles that we have to switch between. And so the idea is, how do you switch between those roles, but in the meantime, give your team members something that they can actually use to solve issues on their own, because we can't do these things ourselves. And so sometimes, actually oftentimes, it's really important to make sure that we equip and develop our team members so they can solve their own problems versus adding on to your already full plate. When we think about leadership coaching, coaching has become a bit of a buzz, honestly, over the past decade or so. But when we talk about leadership coaching, and this comes from a text from Teaching Leadership, leadership coaching focuses and supports more frequent and effective acts of leadership at all levels of business, organizations, and communities. So we're really talking about things that are effective that you're using on a regular basis to support further engagement, to support growth, to support development, to support not being stagnant and keeping people in the same place where they are, but rather how do you help folks get to the next level and hopefully get to a place where they can, really support your organization at a deeper level than they are currently. When we think about coaching, it's one of those helping relationships. And by show of hands, how many of you feel like you have a really good understanding of the differences between these different roles that are mentioned here on the slide? Whether it's mentor or facilitate, sometimes you might hear someone say, oh, you should coach that person, or you should counsel them. You need to develop them. You need to supervise them. Does anyone feel that they have a really good grasp of the difference between all those coaching relationships? I don't see a lot of hands so far. And you know what? That is okay. Because quite frankly, they can be very confusing to understand which one is which, when do you use which, What is the expectation on the outset of which one you use, and what is the expectation on the back end? What kind of positions should the person that you're speaking with be in as a result of having engaged in a mentorship relationship versus a teaching relationship? Whose responsibility is it to contact whom in the context of relationships? Specifically for mentoring, we know that it is the mentee's responsibility to reach out to and follow up with the mentor, not the other way around. And that's totally different if you think about supervising. It's the supervisor's responsibility to make sure that the supervised understands what's required of them. So what we really want to do is, we're not going to cover all of these specific helping relationships, but just wanted to bring this up to highlight that if you feel like it's confusing to understand these roles, you're not alone. It's pretty confusing for a lot of people, and for reason that, you know, they're often thrown around interchangeably, but they are very specific and very different. And so as we go through this presentation, we're going to walk through not all of these, certainly, but just a couple of them to hopefully help you understand what to expect as you're kind of going through these relationships. The three that we're going to kind of drill down into just briefly here include supervising, mentoring, and coaching. So we're just going to break it down initially to just these three. Supervising relationships, and as you see, there's a scale on the left-hand side there around what's involuntary versus what's voluntary. That being said, when we talk about involuntary relationships, we're talking about those that absolutely you don't have a choice in whether or not you do it. Supervising is a perfect example of that, because when you're operating as a supervisor, you're directing or monitoring specific actions to achieve a required outcome. It's very tactical, it's very tangible. If the KPI is around number of communities engaged, there's a specific number that you have to supervise towards and make sure that people are doing whatever it is they need to do to reach that level of engagement that you can actually measure. It's incredibly tangible when you're supervising. On the exact opposite end is coaching. And coaching is a very voluntary type of relationship. And I say that with an asterisk, because sometimes coaching is something that someone will recognize within themselves that they need guided training to achieve a desired outcome. They're interested in a promotion, for example, and they need someone to help them cultivate their skills to make sure that they are in the right position professionally and have the right tool set and the right skills in order to be eligible for that promotion. But there are some times when an employer, and maybe you've been in this situation yourself as leaders within your respective organizations, where you recognize that maybe there's an employee or a team member that is not quite performing up to the level that you would expect them to perform. And you know that having a coaching relationship, some guided training at a level that you're not able to provide or don't have the time to provide would be helpful and beneficial for them. So in that case, you recommend for them a coaching relationship. So sometimes the coaching can be very tactical. I want to have X number of skills in order to be eligible for promotion. Sometimes it's strategic. It's how do we think more strategically or think more 3,000-foot level as we think about outcomes for the various organizations that you're working from. And right in the middle there, quickly, is mentoring. And mentoring is a very interesting relationship because mentoring is specifically based on experience. And using whatever experience that you have to help someone to achieve a desired outcome. So it's very difficult to mentor someone if you haven't been in the place that they're in, but it's a very important helping relationship as well. So digging a little bit deeper, and some of this you've heard before, and I'm reiterating this intentionally. So if you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, so you know, Shauna, you presented all these different helping relationships between facilitate, coach, and counseling, and teaching, and all these things. You told me about relationships that are voluntary, like coaching, versus relationships that are involuntary, like supervising. Well, what do I do when, especially if I'm at the CEO level or I'm at a managing director level? When do I need to supervise someone and when do I need to coach someone? Well, I've broken it down into two specific categories or two columns here. So if you are working with an employee or a team member, and you know that there's a very specific target or deadline that you need them to hit, if you know that you really need to make sure that something is complete in a certain amount of time, if you need to make sure that accuracy is spot on, or there's a specific imperative that you're working towards, that's when you really pull out your supervising hat. that's when you really sort of think about, okay, we have to not micromanage, but manage closely actions and expectations and outcomes. If you're thinking more about collaborating on an issue, or utilizing one of the most brilliant things that we have in the workplace, which is the power of all of our collective diverse minds and intellect, to determine the best approach to a particular situation, or how to reach a specific community that you haven't been able to reach previously. If you're thinking about how do you encourage someone to improve in a certain way, in a way that's not necessarily short term, but a much longer term outcome, that's when you start thinking about coaching and developing and cultivating those coaching relationships. And that's where we want to really focus on today, and cover a tool that really hammers at one of the specific tools around in coaching, in the coaching world rather, that we use to get through how do you collaborate on an issue, determine the best approach, and specifically getting towards an outcome that you didn't have to come up with, but you encourage the employee to come up on their own. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chamlee, who's going to explain more about the model.
Thanks so much, Shauna. So as we mentioned, this is a very tangible tool that you all will be able to use immediately. It is very action-based, and it's designed to provide some structure to the coaching process. Now, some of you may have been able to invest in yourself and hire someone to be your coach. There are certainly people who do this as a profession that are certified coaches. You all have had lots more experience as supervisors, because that's the hat that you're often wearing. And so we are just trying to give you a really tangible tool so you can put on that different coaching hat. You may not be a certified coach. However, this tool is a way of helping you really empower your staff and help them solve their own problems. And it's an acronym. That's why you saw the, grow your team, GRO, is really what you need to remember. And so the first step, G, is goal. And we're going to go through each step in just a minute. The R stands for reality. O stands for options. And W stands for will. And you can see that there in the slide. And so we're going to go through each of these steps, and you are essentially going to figure out how to help a team member, guide them through each of these steps so that eventually they get to the end there, which is will. This is what they are committing to. This is what they will do. This is how they will solve the problem. And we did want to let you know that this model actually comes from a team of consultants. It was created in the 1980s by Sir John Whitmore of Performance Consultants, and it's used in coaching companies as a backbone tool that's used on a regular basis. But there's also been some research to show that those of us who aren't trained coaches can use it too. There's especially a lot of that research in the education world. So it's very tangible and easy to use. And Shauna, if you could advance the slide. Thank you. I just wanted to kind of ground us a little bit to say that one of the reasons a tool like this is so important is because I love this quote by Susan Scott. If you all, Susan Scott's written the book Fierce Conversations. And if you are in a place that you're struggling with problem behavior in the workplace, where you're really needing to have more of an accountability kind of conversation, that's what her book Fierce Conversations is about. But I love this particular quote. Burnout occurs because we are trying to solve the same problem again and again. So it's not because we are trying to solve problems. That's not what burns us out. It's that it's like that beat head against wall, right? We're trying to solve the same problem again and again and again. And so it would be really nice when that same problem that keeps coming up, if some of your team members could figure out how to solve it for themselves so it doesn't keep bubbling up time and time again. So moving kind of to this model and how we're going to use it, and playing on the acronym starting with goal. I want you all, the goal obviously is that you're learning to empower your team to solve more problems on their own. But Shauna and I would like you just for a minute before we really talk through each of the steps to think about what your current reality is right now as a manager or a team member. What are those problems that for you are coming up again and again, and that you think, not this again, or, I really don't want to talk with you about this again because we've already talked about it 6 other times, and I'd really like for you to be able to solve this on your own. So as we introduce this model, if you would begin to just think about your current reality and what that sort of pain point is for you. All right. And Shauna is going to introduce us to each of the 4 steps in just a moment. And so I wanted to note that before we ask you to put your coaching hat on and use this model, first, you've got to keep the supervisor hat on. So before you use the model, there's really 3 key steps that set the stage that are a little bit more of the supervisor role. One of those important steps is that as a team member is coming to you and perhaps they're, whatever the problem is that they're sharing with you, it's important to confirm what they've said and use all of those great techniques of rephrasing the problem, making sure that you're really hearing and understanding what's going on, and then affirming the employee's feelings related to that matter. Because you are wanting them to solve a particular problem on their own by the end, it's also important that you set the expectation at the very start for what the end result of this conversation is going to be. So letting the employee know that you are really want by the end of this conversation for them to figure out how they are going to act to solve the problem.
Thank you for that, Chamlee. And I think to reiterate, these are 3 key steps that are really important for setting that stage. It kind of, we all hear since we're in the South, I'll say this, we all hear the term of, when you hear someone talking about something that you lead with some sweet tea, or maybe I just say that. This is kind of the sweet tea, if you will. So an employee brings you a problem, confirm what you've heard, affirm them, and then also set expectations for the end result, because you're expecting them to come up with a solution to help them kind of grow and develop in that regard. So the first G, again, is goal. And it really gets to the point of what do you want? This particular component of the GROW model requires focus. And for all of you on this call, you understand what it means to really be focused. What is kind of the end result of what do you want for this conversation? Again, as Chamlee mentioned, the idea is to get the employee or to enable the employee to come up with their own solution to the problem. But, we really want to just sort of understand, first of all, what is your goal for the discussion? What is the goal for what you want things to be? And this, again, is from the employee's perspective. When you're talking to an employee and they brought you a problem or an issue, ask them, like, how would you like it to be? What does it look like? You're experiencing this problem. What outcomes would you like? And what will that enable you to do? And then also, what is different? What do you need to be different in order for the problem to be resolved? So, getting to a point of what do you want is really important when it comes to this coaching model. And, even if, to Chamlee's point, even if you're not a certified or a licensed coach, these are still important tools that you can use when you're working with your employees to make sure that they can come up with these solutions on your own. So you're not having to come up with the same solution to the same problem over and over and over again for multiple employees. So again, GROW requires focus. And the way we're going to kind of explain this, I should have mentioned this earlier, is we're going to sort of give you the tool itself. We're going to give to you an example and then give you a couple minutes to work through your turn, if you will, work through what's a problem that you're experiencing currently among your employees, something that keeps coming up over and over again, and how would you apply this tool to your own personal situations? So again, GROW requires focus. What do you want? And now Chamlee's going to take us through a quick example of how that might show up in an actual interaction.
Okay, great. So in this GROW step, so we're going to take it step by step. So the example for the goal section, I'm going to give you a scenario that we tried to make as generic as possible so that you could all relate to it and understand it, but it's not overly specific. So the scenario that we've come up with is that you have two different program supervisors that you supervise and work with, and they are over two different programs, but they regularly are working on very cyclical projects together. They're both really hard workers. Their names are Justin and Maggie. And the end result when they work together is very good. It's always a lot of quality, high production. However, they're also very competitive. And they are regularly complaining about the other. So they complain to you as their supervisor on a regular basis. And then they also are complaining to team members. So you've got Justin now coming to you again. This has been an ongoing thing. And Justin has come again and is complaining. And you really want Justin to be able to solve this problem on his own. And so what you might do in step G for goal is, as Justin comes to you, say, I hear your frustration, and this really seems like it's coming up a lot for you. You work really hard and you achieve amazing things. Actually, Maggie does too. You all make a great team in terms of producing some really good things. But I don't want this to keep coming up for you. And I am seeing that there's a lot of negativity that I'm being brought into and that some of your teammates are being brought into. And so solving this on your own is going to help you really enjoy being in the workplace more. And it's going to make the overall work environment better for everybody else too. So can we agree together that as you and I sit here and talk, that the end goal of this conversation is for you to think through how you can talk to Maggie about this? So, and so then you agree together that that's the goal. And then you begin to ask some questions like, can you tell me what your goal would be with Maggie? What would you like your relationship with her to look like instead? How could it look different? How would you prefer that Maggie treat you when you engage with her on this thing? So beginning to help him think through the goal that he wants with Maggie is the first step.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chamlee.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's just take a minute, if all of you could think for a moment and just think about what's an issue on your team that you see frequently coming up. What is that top issue? And I'm sure it shouldn't take that long for you all to think of it. Because if it's coming up frequently, and I recognize that it's very easy, I would feel the same way, of course, to become frustrated with the same issue coming up over and over and over again. So what is that number one issue that needs to be addressed? And what do you think needs to change? And if you like, you're welcome to leave your thoughts in the comments or in the chat as you're kind of going through, or just write it down wherever you're taking notes. It might kind of help you sort of determine how you can apply the GROW model to an actual situation that you're going through within your organization. All right, so as you continue thinking, we're going to go to the next part of the model. So G, goal, what do you want? Now, the next part for the model is reality, right? What is actually happening now? Now, the GROW model requires you to be realistic. It requires you to really just call it as you see it, if you will. Identify, what is actually happening now? How do you feel about it? What are you doing that, this is important, that takes you towards your goal versus what are you doing that's distracting you from your goal? And that's something we all need to kind of think about, but also helpful for you to bring up to your employee or your team member, to help them really understand reality. If they are specifically doing something that is distracting or something that is progressing you towards a particular goal. Also, even thinking more broadly, who else is affected? if you're in a situation like the one that Chamlee has described with our friends Justin and Maggie here, is their relationship sort of bleeding into other relationships around the office or around the organization that's completely unintentional? So causing the employee to think not just about their own interactions, but the interactions and how that looks to other folks, and what kind of example they're setting more broadly. And then also, why does it keep happening? Is there some sort of issue perhaps, and this is not necessarily implying that you need to go into a therapist role, which is beyond all of our skill set as to become a licensed therapist, but sometimes it feels that way. But the question is, why does it keep happening? Is there a situation where that employee doesn't feel affirmed or needs some assistance or guidance in terms of kind of understanding the outcome of their actions and behaviors? Or is there something else that's happening? Why does that particular situation keep happening? Why does it keep coming up over and over and over again? So, when you're thinking about the R in the GROW model, so again, first of all, set a goal. What do you actually want? The second part being the reality. What is actually happening now? And that will help you kind of continue on in the coaching of your particular team member. So I'll turn it over now to Chamlee to give the next component of the example.
Yeah, so just to stick with our example, to make it a little bit more tangible, you have already asked Justin to describe the goal of what thinks he would like to be happening with Maggie. And so now to help him really describe the reality, you would be asking questions. Again, you've got your coaching hat on, so a lot of this is asking open-ended questions. So Justin, tell me exactly how this is impacting you. I hear that you're really frustrated. Can you give me an example of what has happened recently to make you feel this way? How is it impacting you? What are your feelings around it? Would be another good question. And then it's important as a supervisor to help them think about their own role. We all have a role, especially when we're talking about relationships with people, right? So where can you see any role that you might have in this, Justin? Are there pieces of this that you might take responsibility for that would help you to reach your goal? All right, let's turn it back over to Shauna.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chamlee. That's really important. That ownership piece is something that's sorely missing in a lot of organizations. Doesn't matter the industry, taking that ownership is really important. So establishing a reality is a very important step. I mean, they're all important steps, but definitely an important step of the GROW model. So we're going to turn it over to you again. So you took a minute to think about, what's the number one issue that you feel needs to be addressed in your team? Now take a moment and think about, what is the current reality? What is your team facing? What are the elements that are progressing towards what you want, your goal, or are distracting from that particular goal? So just take a minute, think about it, and we'll continue in just a few moments here. All right, the next component of the GROW model, this one, I think I like this. If I had to choose favorites, I like this part the most. You're not supposed to pick favorites in a model, but I like this one the best. I can't deny it. This part of the model helps you really identify, what could you do? What are the options? You can't necessarily change how someone else does something or someone else's behavior, or what the outcomes are, but you can change your own behavior and what you're doing. So as an employee, what's the problem? How do you solve a particular problem? What is the solution? So what ideas do you have? Is there anything else to do? Think outside the box. What has worked in the past? Are there things that have worked well for this kind of solution in the past that you could leverage for this new particular problem? Where could you find information? We live in this age where information is at your fingertips, and you can find a example solution to just about anything, anywhere. So what are ways that you can use to find additional information, whether it is doing some additional research, or talking to the other person, or getting some additional tools, some additional training? doing things that are a little bit different than maybe how you've done them before, in an effort to really figure out, well, what is the solution to the problem? So really helping the employee to solve their own problem, actually come up with different options to solve those problems. And in effect, what that also does is it empowers that particular employee. If they're coming up with their own options for how to solve problems, that can very easily bleed over into other problems that they might have that they're not even bringing to you. So again, we start with establishing a goal. Second, understanding reality, what is actually happening now. And then based on that goal, what you want and the reality of what you want of what's actually happening now, to really problem solve and figure out how can we get to that place of addressing the real issue at hand. Chamlee?
Yeah. So Justin, what can you do to move toward the goal that you wish for in your work with Maggie? What are some things that you've already thought about or ideas that you have? And then as he begins to share those, asking some follow-up questions like, okay, now within those ideas, what part of that, what piece of that is your own responsibility that you can take action on? How do you wish that Maggie would work with you? Are you clear about what you want from Maggie in this situation? And then if he is able to really state clearly what it is he'd like from Maggie, then how might you ask her for this? What might that look like if you were going to sit down and talk with her about that?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chamlee.
Sure.
So take a minute now and think about, what are the options? What can be done? Think outside the box. This is an opportunity to, especially, funding is an issue for everyone, but if you had to think outside, think beyond funding constraints, what could possibly be done about the particular issue that's being faced? Just take a moment or two to think about that one, and then we'll move on to the next component. All right, the final component is will. So if I had to pick a second favorite, it would be this one. But you're not supposed to choose, I know. So the last component of the GROW model, we've established a goal, we have identified and confirmed reality, we've looked at different options. The last piece, will, requires action. What will you do? Now that you have all these options laid out for yourself, what will you actually do to fix it, to get yourself back to that goal or to achieving that goal that you established back in the first step of this model? So what are you going to do and how? When will you do it? Who will you talk to? Where are you going to go? Is there anything that you need before you act? Importantly, how committed are you to the solution? Because it's one thing to identify that there's a problem and that there's a solution, but are you committed to actually taking action on that solution, to fixing that problem and achieving the goal that you have in the first place? So to really grow, it requires you to look at your will. What are you going to do? What's the action that you're going to take? What's the tangible thing that you're going to do to make progress on the problem that has been identified? So this is a really important component. And I would actually say that certainly we're talking at this point about helping employees and empowering employees to solve their own problems and to come up with solutions to their own problems and take action on those solutions. But to some extent, when we're thinking about supervisors and kind of management responsibilities, sometimes this action-based component will require a little bit more from you as an employer. Because if there is an environmental issue happening, or if there is a funding related issue that's keeping you from achieving a certain outcome, if there's another broader issue that's beyond the span of control for that particular team member or employee, naturally that's going to require you to take some action as much as is appropriate to address that particular issue. So Chamlee is going to walk us through the last component of the example.
Right. Justin, I really appreciate, again, you taking the time to talk through this with me today. I know this is an issue that you want to be resolved, and you've really described some great examples, and it seems like you're really clear now on what it is you need from Maggie, and also what your own role in this situation might be. I love all the options and thoughts that you just outlined of how you might reach your goal. And what I'd really like to know now is, are you willing to actually have this conversation? Is there anything at all that you might need from me to feel more prepared for this conversation? Because I want to make sure that as you're walking in, that you're really clear on what you want to say and also on where you might take responsibility for some pieces. Is there anything that we might need to think about related to timing of when this conversation might need to happen, given other tasks and deadlines that are coming up? And then at the end of the conversation, you're just going to really want to make sure, and this is why this step probably is my favorite, because I think so many times we have conversations with people and talk about a lot of things, but there's no commitment to action. So by the end of the conversation, you really want to make sure that that Justin has said, yes, this is exactly what I'm committing to do. This is how I'm going to do it, and this is when I'm going to do it.
I agree, Chamlee. And what I like the most about Chamlee's example here is the directionality that was used in her words. What are you going to do? How are you committed? What is your next step? So making it clear to the employee that you're expecting them to step up and handle the solution and follow through on the solution on their own versus you taking on all the responsibility of solving that particular employee's problems. So with that being said, let's just take one more quick minute and think about, how this applies to the example that you started out with from the GROW model. Again, establishing a goal. What do you want? Understanding reality. What is happening now? Looking at options. What's possible? What can you possibly do? And then last but not least, we're thinking about what will you do to address that particular problem that you're faced with? So think about that. And, if you imagine yourself sitting in your office or on a Zoom call across from your particular employee or team member and asking them, asking them to ask themselves, when I return to work, what will I actually do to address this problem? Am I committed? Is the rest of my team committed? What am I as an employee going to do to take the next step in committing to addressing that particular problem? So I hope this is giving you some great tools to put into your toolkit. And at this point, I'm going to transition back to Chamlee, who's going to kind of take us through the last component of information to share with you regarding the GROW model.
Thank you so much, Shauna. So in addition to giving you all a very tangible tool that you can use, we also wanted to give you a handout, a takeaway. You can see the QR code here. Please feel free to scan that. What this is it lays out the GROW model that we just went through so that you have it and can save it on your own computer or print it out and have it in front of you. In addition to the GROW model, it actually provides a list of different coaching questions. So for those of us that are more comfortable with wearing our supervisor hat, because that's what we do a lot of the time, having a list of some questions that we can practice and begin thinking about for when we do choose to put on our coaching hat is often very helpful. And that's what you will get this handout. You can also see Shauna's website here and my website. And our contact information are on those websites. We would love to hear from you, just what you're thinking about from this presentation, things you're struggling with. Both of us have formed our consulting firms because we want to be a support to this sector. We know how hard your work is as leaders and as leaders in change, and it is very, very important. All right, so in closing, this is where we ask you all, before we open up with, I think we are going to have a little bit of time for some questions, but this is where we ask you all to begin to commit. So looking at the model, using the goal section, what is that one employee problem that you keep solving over and over again, but you shouldn't be, or you wish you spent less time solving it and that they could solve it on their own. Hopefully you've already been thinking about this as we've been going through the presentation with the different steps. Think again about what your current reality is in this. Sometimes the motivation that we need as managers is to really think about, to have this kind of conversation to encourage an employee to solve their own problem. We have to think about how it's impacting us, right? And really sit with that and realize that that's not okay, and how it's impacting other team members too. What options do you have in using the model with this employee, right? How might you use this model to help this employee solve his or her own problem the next time? And then finally, just like we were saying as in the example with Justin and Maggie, that you don't want to let Justin leave the room before he's committing to what he's going to do and when he's going to do it. We're asking the same of you. What are you committing to based on what you've heard? How might you use this? With whom on your team? And when might you use it? And it may be that all you're willing to do today is to find 20 minutes this week to sit down and really write down the steps of this model and think about how you might use it with an employee. Okay. Let's see, I think, is that our last slide, Shauna? I think now we can move, yes. So here again is our website, but we've got a little bit of time here for questions. And I think Desmond from Together SC also has a couple of announcements. So please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask questions. We'd love to have some discussion and just hear from you on your thoughts with this model and how you might use it. And I actually see we do have a question from Madeline. It's good to see you're still here, Madeline. Is this tool best used in one-on-one conversations? Can you also use with a group or team? That's a great question. And the short answer is that it was designed to be more one-on-one. However, I have used this tool with coaching triads. So what's really interesting is you can start to think about how to build more of a coaching mindset or a coaching culture within your organization. And it can be peer-to-peer. And what I often encourage is that you've got one person that's in the role of coach, one person in the role of coachee, and then others that are there listening are the observers that are making sure that the coach or the coachee is staying in their role as they're walking through the model and offering input on, wow, that question really helped move this conversation forward. You know, I love the way you said that, so just offering some input so that it's better and easier one-on-one, but certainly can be used as a group as long as everybody's clear on what their role might be.
I would agree with you on that, Chamlee. And I think as well, it's also helpful if you have a particular employee that's coming to you, but perhaps they're a little bit stumped on what options are. So perhaps you go through the goal and the reality component with that employee one-on-one, and then you give them time and flexibility to, explore options with perhaps a group or a set of individuals who might be directly impacted by the issue. To come up with a set of actions that they can then commit to as part of the will component of the model.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, in the scenario example we just gave, it's possible that you could walk through these steps with both parties, right? Justin and Maggie could even sit down together and talk through together their goals, their own reality and how it's impacting them and the options that they have to work through this together.
What other questions do you all have or comments?
This is something you all think that you might use. Is there anybody that's like, okay, I think I've got, and we're asking you to share your example, but that you really have willed away that you're going to implement this, whether it's in your professional or your personal life. All right, quiet group, but I do see Madeline saying she loves the acronym, that it helps to remember how to have a conversation.
I have to admit, I was going to leave, and then I went, I might need to listen to this. So I texted and said, I'm going to be late for my other meeting. Thank you guys so much. It really is, for those of, nonprofit executive directors don't take these jobs because we want to be managers. We take it because we're passionate about the work, right?
So
And
true.
so sometimes the management part of what we aim to do is sort of, oh yeah, maybe I need to do that. Maybe I need to think about my people. And so having little tools that can help us think about it in the spur of the moment, because I don't know that we often really do sit down and say, okay, this is a coaching conversation. We just sort of end up there, particularly in those of us that work virtually. You're suddenly in the middle of a call and you're going, oh, wait, maybe this should transition to a coaching call. So let me pick out my little sheet and look at it and see what the questions I should be asking. So I thank you, and I really appreciate it. Anyone else got anything that they want to weigh in on? Because I know it's not easy to take all this in virtually, but thank you for the handout. I think that was an excellent idea. So I see Brooke has also shared in the chat box a link to the survey that we ask you guys to fill out after this, telling us what you think, so we can know, is this the topic you want to hear about? Is this a format for learning that works for you? As well as a link to our learning calendar for looking at other opportunities for doing that. And Shauna and Chamlee, I thank you for the very professional presentation you've given. And I know it's not easy to do it in the silence of a Zoom room. So sometimes maybe we should limit it to 12 and make everyone stay on camera, make it more engaging that way. But I'm thrilled that you will be doing some similar work at the summit, and we look forward to learning from that. And any other closing remarks from you two or the Together SC team? Destiny, I jumped in. Desmond, I jumped in. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say. Oh, I see a few folks saying great information. Yeah.
And I would say thank you so much for having us, Madeline and team, and for allowing us to present this information. And again, anything we can do to be of help to anyone as you all pursue your mission, we'd be more than happy to sit and have a chat with you, or to go over more of this acronym with you. It really is our honor to support people who are doing very important work in our communities. So thank you for having us.
And I will just be out there. When I was a manager at the Community Foundation, long time ago in my 40s and 50s, I was not as good a manager as I could have been. And now I have a coach that works with us. Patrick Jinks has worked with us. And I don't know whether Desmond A. and Brooke and Destiny would agree, but I'm working more at it. So, to those of CEOs who don't really want to manage, there's really no way around it. We need to. So having coaches has been very helpful to me, and I hope others will give it consideration. So thank you all. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Together SC. Yeah, ditto on Shauna's remarks. Appreciate everything that you all do for the sector.
Good.